You're an hour into your shift, 7 patients in the hall, 3 admitted and waiting for beds. Attendings and nurses both stretched thin. And at 9 a.m., someone from administration sends an email, subject line, improving throughput. Here's the problem. They're not wrong that throughput matters. But calling ED boarding a throughput problem is like calling a pipeline rupture a pressure issue. Technically accurate, operationally useless. I'm Chet Shermer and have been practicing emergency medicine for 25 years. I have been on the front lines and in leadership positions trying to deal with this important issue. The standard framing goes like this. Patients are staying too long in the ED. It must be that the ED is moving too slowly.
The fix?
See patients faster. Discharge sooner. Improve the front end. This logic sounds right. And in some cases, minor care, fast track, low acuity volume. It is right. Speed matters there. But when you are looking at a wall of admitted patients sitting in ED beds waiting for an inpatient room, you are not looking at an emergency department problem. You are looking at a hospital-wide capacity problem that is presenting in the emergency department. The ED is the exhaust valve of the hospital. When the hospital fills up, the pressure shows up in your department. Let's define the term precisely. ED boarding is what happens when a patient who has been evaluated, treated, and admitted to an inpatient service occupies an emergency department bed while waiting for that inpatient bed to become available. That patient is no longer an emergency department patient in any meaningful clinical sense. Their care plan is written. Their team is identified. They're just waiting for a room. But they are in your bed. And as long as they are in your bed, you cannot use that space for new patients arriving through your door. That is the operational reality. The throughput framing says, see the next patient faster. The capacity framing says, the bottleneck is upstream of you, and you cannot discharge your way out of a census problem. The primary driver of ED boarding is inpatient bed availability, full stop. When inpatient census is high, discharge rates slow, and bed turnover drops, boarding goes up. This is not a coincidence. It is a direct mechanical relationship. The relevant question is not, how fast is the ED seeing patients? It is, what is the hospital's inpatient discharge rate between 6 a.m. and noon? Because if admitted patients aren't leaving inpatient beds in the morning, ED patients can't move into them by afternoon, and by 6 p.m. you have a department full of boarders. That is a hospital operations problem, not an emergency medicine problem. The second driver is discharge planning. Patients who could go home from inpatient beds on Tuesday are still there Thursday because case management hasn't arranged placement, insurance hasn't approved the facility, or the family hasn't been reached. Each of those patients represents a bed that an admitted ED patient cannot occupy. Multiply that across a 100-bed medical floor, and you start to see the scale of the problem. When you hear about boarding in your ED, ask where the hospital's inpatient discharge backlog is. That number matters more than your door-to-provider time. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Boarding is visible in the ED. It shows up in patient satisfaction scores, in staff burnout data, in adverse event reports. So it gets attributed to emergency medicine. Inpatient discharge delays are less visible. They don't generate the same operational pressure, so they get less attention. The result, emergency physicians absorb the consequences of system-wide failures. Staff work in degraded conditions. Patients wait in hallways. And the root cause, inpatient flow, gets one more PowerPoint and one more task force. If you are in a leadership position, this is where your energy belongs. Not in squeezing another minute off door-to-provider time, in driving inpatient accountability for morning discharges. 3 things to take from this brief. First, learn your hospital's inpatient discharge rates by hour. That data exists. Pulling it will tell you more about your boarding problem than any ED process metric. Second, when boarding is on the agenda, reframe the conversation. The question is not how fast the ED sees patients. The question is where admitted patients are going and how quickly. Third, control the framing and you change what gets fixed. If emergency medicine accepts the throughput label, emergency medicine owns the problem. Make the system own it instead. This is part of the Global MedOps Command Clinical Brief series. If this landed, share it with a colleague who needs to hear it or an administrator who needs to be challenged by it. Next brief, the myth that observation units are just short stays. Same framing problem, different financial consequences. Stay prepared, stay educated. Out.